When we scroll through social media, we often see snapshots of perfect lives. Smiling families, warm vacations, proud parents sharing milestones of their children. But sometimes, those perfect pictures hide shadows. This is the story of Emily Long, a young mother, a wife, and a woman who built an online following by sharing her family's struggle with illness. To many, she seems strong, resilient, even inspiring. But behind the carefully crafted videos and heartfelt captions, Emily carried secrets. Secrets that would end in one of the most heartbreaking tragedies New Hampshire had ever seen. It's a story of love, illness, pressure, hidden financial turmoil, and ultimately, a devastating ending that shocked an entire community. Tonight, we take you deep into the Emily Long case, not as tabloid headlines, but as a human story. A story that forces us to ask, how much pain can one person carry before they break? The Longs were not a family anyone would have expected to see in the news. To their neighbors, they were kind, polite, and very much devoted to one another. Emily, 34 years old, had energy and charisma. She was active on TikTok, where she documented the ups and downs of motherhood and family life. Her posts were warm, humorous, and relatable, the kind of content that made other parents nod in recognition. Her husband, Ryan Long, was 48. Friends described him as a quiet, hardworking man who loved his children deeply. He wasn't the type to seek attention, but he stood solidly at the center of their home. Together, they were raising 3 children: Parker, 8 years old, little Ryan, just 6, and their youngest, a toddler, still learning to form sentences and full of innocent laughter. In photos, the Longs seemed picture perfect. Birthdays, beach trips, holidays, always smiling, always together. But the truth of a family's life rarely fits inside a photo frame. In April of 2025, the family's life was shaken to its core. Ryan was diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive form of brain cancer. Doctors explained the reality. Treatments could slow the disease, but there was no cure. For Emily, this was shattering. She was suddenly faced with the terrifying thought of raising 3 children without her partner. She became not only a wife, but also a caregiver, a full-time parent, and the emotional anchor of the family. On social media, she began to share pieces of this journey. Videos of hospital visits, posts about the overwhelming weight of fear, late-night reflections about staying strong for the kids. Her following grew rapidly. Strangers praised her bravery, calling her an inspiration. They sent supportive comments and told her she wasn't alone. But behind that encouragement, Emily was unraveling. Emily's TikTok presence became her outlet. For a while, it gave her a sense of community, a place to express her fears and receive comfort. But it also created a kind of pressure. When thousands of people are watching, you feel you have to keep performing, keep being the strong wife, the resilient mother, the woman who holds it all together. Some of her posts, however, hinted at deeper struggles. She wrote about depression, about therapy being too expensive, about feeling like she was drowning under the weight of responsibilities. Looking back now, many of her words read like warning signs. But at the time, her followers scrolled by, leaving a few comments of support before moving on to the next video. It is a tragic reality of the internet. Pain can be broadcast to thousands, and yet still go unseen. While Ryan's illness was visible to the world, another crisis was unfolding in silence. Emily worked as director of operations for Wingits, a local restaurant chain. On the surface, she was professional, competent, and trusted. But in the summer of 2025, her employer began noticing discrepancies. By August, the allegations were staggering. Emily had allegedly embezzled more than $660,000 from the company over a period of 2 years. Investigators later said there were handwritten checks deposited into her personal account, missing cash deposits, and bank statements that appeared altered. Her employer filed a police report just 1 week before the tragedy. To outsiders, Emily was still the brave mother on TikTok, but behind closed doors, she may have been terrified that the truth about the missing money was closing in. Combine that with Ryan's declining health, the responsibility of 3 children, and her mental health struggles, and the pressure must have felt unbearable. By August, Emily's social media posts had taken on a heavier tone. She wrote about exhaustion, about feeling like she couldn't keep going. Her words, once filled with humor, now carried despair. In one post, she suggested that therapy felt out of reach. In another, she hinted at financial stress. Reading them now feels chilling, as though she was quietly preparing for something. Friends later said she seemed tired, distracted, as if carrying a burden too heavy to share. And then came August 18, 2025. That morning, in the Long family's quiet Madbury home, the tragedy unfolded. By the time police arrived, Emily, Ryan, Parker, and little Ryan were gone. Only the toddler was found alive, unharmed. Authorities confirmed it was a murder-suicide. But they did not release graphic detail, and in truth, they didn't need to. The devastation spoke for itself. News of the Long family's death spread quickly. For neighbors, it was incomprehensible. They had waved at Emily just days before. They had seen the children riding their bikes in the yard. How could a family that seemed so normal, so loving, end in such horror? The answer was not simple. It wasn't just Ryan's illness. It wasn't just financial troubles. It wasn't just depression. It was all of it together. Layer upon layer of stress, despair, and fear that eventually became unbearable. The tragedy left the community grieving not only the lives lost, but also the reality that signs of struggle had been visible, yet missed. In the weeks after the tragedy, Emily's employer confirmed the allegations of embezzlement. More than $500,000 was missing, but in a surprising twist, the company's owner announced that he would not pursue legal action against the surviving family. Instead, he said, if any money could be recovered, it would go towards supporting Emily and Ryan's surviving child. It was a gesture of compassion in the midst of heartbreak. The Long case is not just a story of crime. It is a story of human fragility. It reminds us that mental health struggles are often invisible, that the pressure to appear strong, whether in real life or on social media, can push people deeper into isolation. That financial strain, illness, and emotional despair can create a storm powerful enough to sweep away even the most loving families. Emily's actions were devastating. There is no way to undo the loss. But to reduce this story to a headline would be to miss the deeper message. This is a call to notice the signs, to ask harder questions when someone says they are struggling, to recognize that behind a smiling photo may be a person quietly falling apart. The story of Emily Long and her family is one of the darkest tragedies in recent memory. A husband battling illness, a wife overwhelmed by pressure, children caught in the storm, and a community left to ask how this could have happened. If anything can be taken from the story of Emily Long and her family, it is this. When someone says they are struggling, listen. When someone hints at despair, lean in closer. When someone smiles while their eyes tell a different story, notice. Because sometimes the difference between despair and hope is not grand intervention, but simple acknowledgement. The candles at the vigils eventually burned out. The news cycle moved on. The world outside Madbury turned its attention to other stories. But for those who loved the Long family, for those who lived in the neighborhood, for those who still see Emily's face on their feeds, the tragedy never really ended. It echoes quietly, reminding them of the shadows that can exist behind even the most beautiful pictures. And so the story remains, not as a headline, not as a tabloid scandal, but as a human story. A story of love, illness, fear, financial ruin, and a breaking point. A story of children lost, a community shaken, and a reminder that sometimes the brightest smiles hide the deepest pain. There are no easy answers. But what we can take from this story is the reminder that people rarely suffer alone by choice. More often, they suffer silently, hoping someone will notice. If you or someone you know is struggling with depression, financial stress, or overwhelming pressure, please know that help exists. Reach out, talk to someone. You are not alone. Because sometimes, noticing the shadows behind a smile can be the difference between despair and hope.